Awesome. Yeah. Hey, everyone, joining in the webinar. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. While we're getting started, would love if people can use the chat application and just like let me know what company you're with or what function you focus on, or if there's anything you're hoping to really get out of the webinar today. So I can definitely orient a lot of the content towards that. Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. Great to meet everyone. Um, awesome. Yeah, understanding opportunities to streamline deduction management and efficiency. So definitely what we'll be focused on here. And then yeah, like applications about AI and like how we can use deductions. Definitely we'll spend the second part covering a little bit of AI use cases and like a little bit about Glimpse and how we use AI as well. So cool. Um, Yeah, I guess we can go ahead and get started. Hey everyone, I'm Akash, one of the founders and the CEO at Glimpse. We're an end-to-end deduction service powered by AI. We focus, r really closely on KeHE and Unify among other distributors and retailers. So, in the webinar today, I'll talk through like different types of distributor deductions we see, the most common ways to help streamline management, identify invalid deductions, etc. And then in the second part, we'll talk a little bit about Glimpse and then how we're helping, over 60 leading brands manage their deductions and use AI to really streamline the process, and an exclusive offer we have for attendees today. So, jumping right into, just set the stage and align on a definition of deductions. So deductions are when a retailer or distributor deducts amounts from an invoice from CPG brands. They occur once you sign a contract with the distributor. So, this was just a high level definition, just to orient around anyone who in the audience that may not know. For the webinar today, we'll focus on distributor deduction specifically. So this is a good example, for any of the folks here that work with Unify, you probably receive tons of these, tons of this exact image, every single day, every single week. It's like a remittance that comes from your distributor. And what you can see here is not only are you seeing like you're just seeing a lot of different line items sort of deducted except for like from the positive amount. So even though you see an amount here for $11,995, ultimately the total paid amount is $3,839. And this is really common in the CPG industry, especially for using a distributor to sort of help grow your sales among retailers. And brands can receive thousands of deductions every single month. So it becomes a really tedious pain point to really understand how to best streamline deductions. Um, so the most common deductions, we see at Glimpse are spoilages, returns, and damages. And these usually occur because a distributor like KeHE requires a 2% spoils allowance on all products ordered. So this is something that you might see come in every single invoice almost. And the other one are are promotional and slotting deductions. And these can kind of occur whenever you start at a new retailer to expand store count, at existing retailers, expanding SKUs. There'll always be slotting charges associated. And we see, brands get hit with this all the time, especially when they're in growth mode and trying to really expand to new doors, utilizing KeHE and Unify. And the other reason that promotional deductions are so common is just the nature of the game of CPG and retail. So getting consumers to buy and try your product, um, and running promotions in store. And these are things that, are usually planned like a year in advance. But these types of deductions come in as MCBs, scans, and advertising and display deductions. And when we walk through the Glimpse platform later on in the session, we'll kind of see, how we're able to slice these out just because there's so many different types of deductions as well. Um, even in the bucket of promotions. And we see, retailer specific promotional deductions, general promotional deductions, etc. A big part of what we do at Glimpse and a big part of what we'll cover in this webinar are like valid versus invalid deductions. What we learned when we sort of came into the space is the average percentage of invalid deductions with KeHE and Unify are 5 to 10%. So the reason that it's so important to stay on top of your deductions are because a majority of deductions are valid, but because of that high percentage of invalid deductions, it's super important to almost validate like every single deduction coming in to make sure you're not losing any money to invalid deductions. A good simple equation here is if your trade spend is 25%, using the 5 to 10% above, 2.5% of your bottom line can go to invalid deductions. And that was actually, like a core thesis of why we set out to start Glimpse was to help brands get that 2.5% of their money back. Some of the most common examples of invalid deductions, and yeah, definitely would love to see any engagement in the chat if people run into this at their companies. But from what we see every single day, parsing, I guess, thousands of deductions across our 60 customers. These are some of the most common types of deductions that we see that are invalid, that are potentially disputable to get money back. So one are short shipments. So this is when a distributor says you didn't ship in full. So say you send X amount of units to KeHE or Unify that then gets sold to retailers from a purchase order that you received. You can get hit with a deduction saying that you didn't ship in full, even though you know that you shipped in full. Invalid promotional deductions are another one, and these ones are much harder to get into the details just because of how long some of these deductions are, where that information hides, etc. But these usually come in the form of, say that you agreed upon a specific promotional window at a specific retailer from January to March. The deductions won't even come until, a couple of months after. So when you're verifying them, you'll need to see that they came in that January to March window. And we see cases all the time where a deduction could come in charging you for a promotion in April, even though your window that you agreed upon was January to March. Another one, which is just seems like straight data entry issues, are charging for retailers that you don't distribute to anymore. Just like a couple of weeks ago, we ran into a situation for one of our customers where they stopped distributing the Sprouts in Q4 of 2023, so a year ago. But they received an influx of deductions around Q2 of 2024 with deductions tied to Sprouts for Q1 of 2024. So a lot of these were invalid, and it ended up being like maybe like 30 or $40,000 of deductions that came in that were invalid, that would have been really easy to miss just because they came in multiple invoices for a retailer that they didn't even distribute product to anymore. And finally, there's like a miscellaneous suite of deductions that we've seen, and we'll talk through some of these strategies, but things like early payments. So say that you're allocating 2% with like Unify or KeHE to get paid net 15 instead of net 45. It's keeping track of that just becomes super tedious as well because it comes in every single payment, but sometimes you don't get paid in those 15 days. And those are end up being deductions that can be disputable because they're not abiding by the agreed upon terms. So when we talk about applications of AI and like what we do at Glimpse, we'll talk through some of these examples even deeper. This is just an example where like you can kind of see here like this is a UDR or like an unloading discrepancy report from KeHE where the issue is a short shipment of one case. You can typically go to your relevant bill of lading that's signed and see that you actually shipped the correct amount of cases. And like that's a way to sort of dispute and verify if a short shipment was invalid or valid. So for the next part of the webinar, I'll just quickly talk through like best strategies if you're not using a solution like Glimpse and what we've seen work really well internally to really be on top of managing deductions and also really focusing on being able to have the evidence in place to invalidate and fight a deduction if it's invalid. So the first part here is how to best create a paper trail to validate deductions. And in practice, some of these things may seem like simple, simple steps, but we've seen like every company is completely different. And some of the times it becomes really hard to validate deductions just because this type of information I'll talk through is like not always organized. And you can always go back and fight deductions, typically for the past 6 months to a year. So even if like some of these strategies aren't in place today, just even having like an effort to get this documentation organized can be really fruitful for a company. Just because if you haven't been on top of validating all your deductions, and you're in maybe like 3 or 4 thousand doors through KeHE Unified. If you go back in the past 6 to 12 months, you may be able to find, near $100,000 worth of potential invalid deductions. So going through the best way to create a paper trail. So the first thing is contract compliance. And this is super duper important because a lot of times some of these invalid deductions tied to promotions might just live in your email or conversations, or your brokers may have authorization to validate things for you that you don't even have visibility into. So it's super critical to work with your brokers and buyers to ensure that every promotion has some sort of contract or like an email trail outlining the details. Because you can even like dispute a deduction showing like an email screenshot of a thread with your buyer. So it's super important. And what we always recommend to companies is to really start this process of getting everything into writing and just start something like a Dropbox or a Google Drive or something that you can keep track of this and tie it quickly back to the promotion in which the contract is tied to. If you have this super cleanly organized, it becomes now a really great process so that every time a promotional deduction comes in, you can quickly verify that if it is valid or invalid. And same thing on promotional calendars as well. Having a detailed and organized promotional calendar that outlines everything. So what we've seen as like best practice is looking at it in two tiers. So one, your distributor level promotions that you've agreed upon for the year. So like specific campaigns or like when you're doing your OIs, etc. And then having everything on a per retailer basis, on a grid, on a per time basis, on a monthly basis, and exactly the detail. Because that then allows you to have really clear reference points when you start getting hit with deductions. So I think one of the most painful parts about deductions is planned versus actuals typically has a 3 to 6 month lag. So, all right, I mean, and I guess even at the planning stage, almost a year back. So like right now, or even like at the end of Q3, a lot of brands are planning their promotions for the fiscal year of 2025. So agreeing upon promotions in September to see them go live in March and then get deductions back the following August, it becomes really easy to miss certain deductions to see if they're valid or invalid without having a really detailed and organized promotional calendar. And for any brands after this as well that happy to share over a template that we like internally at Glimpse, if it could be helpful if this isn't already a process in place. And the last piece, and this also really fluctuates company by company, is having very detailed and sufficient freight documentation. So what we typically recommend to companies is to have an organized folder of POs and invoices, as well as other documentation such as bill of ladings and proof of deliveries. If you already have like a modern 3PL software that offers this, or like a modern EDI tool, etc., a lot of this might be in place. But if you don't, this is super important. We've worked with like a handful of companies that the signed BOL is also just still a physical copy. Like in the back of the office, there's just like folders of bill of ladings that are not even digitized. We really recommend creating some sort of like folder structure where you can quickly access a bill of lading tied to the original PO, because the same thing, one of the most um common set of invalid deductions are freight related deductions, so short shipments, overages, etc. So it's super important to have this documentation organized, because you can quickly provide a paper trail, and that then allows you to show clear evidence and get money back. And at Glimpse, this is like probably like the number one type of invalid deduction that we go after when this is organized. So yeah, I guess the next slide was reducing freight deductions. So um, just kind of continuing on that, but having detailed documentation from start to finish is super important. And if you don't already have this in place, definitely highly recommend. But even the documentation and the actual like verbiage on the bill of lading is super important. So to be able to actually successfully invalidate a short shipment, for example, from KH Unify, you need to be able to have a signed bill of lading that lays out exact case quantities itemized that were packed and shipped. Sometimes you can also get around this by having a bill of lading that's signed along with the pack list if the bill of lading itself doesn't have exact case quantities. Um, but this is the number one way. And if you haven't already had this as a process internally, there's just so much money on the table that could be identified if you're able to successfully invalidate and fight invalid freight charges. And then um, the other piece is, not just in fighting deductions, because deductions are an after the like after the aftermath of typically like errors coming from the distributors, etc. But to be able to reduce freight deductions just more generally, like starting the process internally of having like internal controls around delivery expectations and delivery windows will also help reduce late fees and service level fines. So what this kind of means is, and we see this a lot with companies that are growing super quickly, but having to fulfill a ton of POs without a lot of the process in place can lead a lot to like late deliveries, um, like service level fines based on your agreed upon terms with distributors, etc. So really like being able to control that is like the other way to like really stop the issue at the root. So the first point I mentioned is really to help get you money back from the deductions you're already getting. And the second is to kind of like reduce them more generally. Now on the promo side, really, I think a lot of it is process related, and like trying to work with your reps whenever you can at these distributors. So the first piece is to really have your KHE roadmap filled out in advance, tied to the timelines and aligned with on your KE representative. Because in that way, you'll be able to start the conversation earlier and start creating that paper trail, so that if you ever get hit with deductions a year later, tied to these promotions, you'll be able to actually have the paper trail. You can always escalate things with your KE representative if you need to, etc. Um, and the next one is to make sure all ad fees are spelled out in your retailer promotional contracts. So we see a lot of situations where like really crazy high ad fees come in, and there's no way for a brand to even dispute them just because it wasn't documented anywhere. So it's hard to escalate, etc. And ad fees specifically are where things can really skyrocket, especially if demand is, consumer demand is doing well at store. So if you have your fees spelled out, you can always reference that after the fact to validate or invalidate because it's really hard to comb through all the deduction documents, especially promo related ones, and understand if your terms are even like correct. For example, you can get an MCB report that's like 50 pages long, and each line item has a specific, a different number or percentage taken off the scan that happened at store. Without you being able like to dissect all of those, you may not even remembered if you agreed to 20% or 15% or an EDLP or anything like that. So having that spelled out is super important. And finally, a lot of this advice that I'm sharing today has come from our team of deductions experts internally, and also like so a lot of this is, tried and true at some of the largest companies like Impossible Foods, Lily Sweets, etc. And the last thing that, I was told was building relationships with your buyers and brokers can also help reduce promo deductions in another way. You can get special deals, you can get discounted advertising or marketing spends. This is also why having the right broker is really helpful because you can get deals that are specific shelf space, etc. that can work really well as well. Like we've seen, some of our customers that have like minority-led founders, etc. You can get specific types of promos or be a part of specific campaigns that can help reduce the overall cost as well. So I'll kind of pause there if there's any questions in the chat so far. Would love to, go deeper into anything that was covered. If not, the second part of the webinar really wanted to focus on what we do at Glimpse and show a demo of that as well. Looks like we had one hand raise. Stuti, if you wanted to go ahead and message in the chat, or let me see how this works. Yeah, and actually feel free. I think you can unmute yourself and ask a question. Actually, no, I think you can message in the chat and then I can answer it directly for everyone. Yeah, so this is a great question. So overpulls are typically one of the hardest deduction types to fight and combat just because the trail is really hard to be created. So um in terms of one second, sorry. In terms of like the high level advice that I can sort of give there, just because overpulls are one of the hardest deduction types to combat. Um, because it's typically a supply chain issue at um it's supply chain issue that occurs like at the distributor level. In terms of the success that we've seen in the past, like one time, a brand basically had a clear trail of like a clear trail of fulfilling POs 100%. Um, and we're able to show that case. So then when they got hit with the overpull charge multiple times, they were able to go back and say that we did, fulfill this 100%. So how could we have overpulls? But yeah, that's kind of like the main thing there. It's like hard to dispute because it's like a different supply chain issue essentially. So um the other thing that we've seen, so basically it's kind of just showing that showing that they were fulfilled 100 like in full 100% times, but it's typically tied to like not properly ordering. So that's kind of the most I can say. But one thing I can also offer is after this, when we talk about Glimpse, whenever we can always, set up time with one of our deductions experts internally, and they can kind of talk through any of their experiences that they've had with overpulls as well. Looks like we got one more question. Yeah, so in terms of I think both questions were kind of tied to how effective tied to Amazon and then also like major e-com. So starting off, our definitely at Glimpse, our service and our goal is to offer this for all major retailers and major e-com like Amazon. The reason that we hyper focused on Kehi and Unified to start off with was to really develop like immense expertise in being able to maximize the money back for brands. So um we basically have created a fully automated playbook of pulling in deductions, classifying them, and like creating the playbook to get money back on every single type of deduction that comes in. So today we work, so that's why we kind of hyper focus on Keihin Unify as an initial focus. But over the next couple of months, we are launching a lot of the major retailers. Like one exciting announcement is we did just launch CVS. So for anyone that works at CVS, we can also offer our services. Um, Going into like the new year, we'll be launching like Target, Kroger, Walmart, Amazon, etc. The main thing kind of comes down to expertise on the types of deductions themselves, because every single distributor and retailer comes with, dozens and dozens of types of deductions that all have different steps in terms of determining if they're valid or invalid. So for us, we're continuing to build that expertise and then launch our fully AI-driven service essentially. Um, and against Amazon deductions, it's kind of that same answer where definitely, especially with like the FBA program, etc. There's a lot of deductions that we've kind of seen come in that are like invalid, but the steps to kind of dispute them ultimately, vary on a per deduction basis. Cool. Are there any other questions so far? So, the newest chat that came in was an issue that I've seen difficult to track is free goods for stores and the duplication of stores. Can you address this? Yeah, this is a really good question. And it's like it'll, it kind of transitions us really well into what we do at Glimpse. Because this is really hard, for example, of like a human eye to be able to track and keep track of on a deduction basis. Um, so that is, one of the great applications of AI. So like at Glimpse, the way that we address this is we actually pull in sales data as well, and it allows us to create a list of all of the active retailers that you're currently distributing in. And once we have that, we've built AI-driven software that on a per deduction basis will always be tracking if if the deduction and the retailers included actually are part of your active retailer list. So when I walk you through our Glimpse dashboard, you can actually see one of the things that our AI does is extract out all the retailers that are part of every single deduction. So you can quickly scan and see if a retailer is valid or invalid. Um, Same thing on like the free goods for stores. So our AI is able to actually pull out in a specific deduction document if like it's 100% discount, which is typically the same thing as like a free goods essentially. And then we can kind of verify that to your promo calendar to kind of see if that's something that you actually offered. So a really good question that something that Glimpse uniquely is designed to help address. Cool. I'll jump into the next part, which is kind of going deeper into what we do at Glimpse and how we're using AI to help streamline the deductions management process, and then can reopen questions accordingly. So at Glimpse, we're an end-to-end deduction service powered by AI. And what that means is we actually automate the full process of pulling in all of your deductions into one place, and we categorize them using our AI-driven classification system for KK and unified deductions. And then after that, we actually identify and fight invalid deductions on your behalf. And the way that we do this is by having a dedicated client manager and an in-house deductions expert working on your account. So when you sign on with Glimpse, you'll have like a full expert deductions expert that's directly tied to your account. And our experts have spent 8 to 10 years as full-time deductions analysts at companies like Impossible Foods, Lily Sweets, Pop Chips, Waterloo Sparkling Water, and more. Um, we currently work with over 60 brands since launching in April and are getting back, thousands of dollars every single week for our customers. And the way our pricing works is we have a really low monthly fee based on the number of doors that you distribute into via Kahin Unify plus a commission on what we win back. And today, like the exclusive offer for everyone attending is we're doing a 2-month free trial to take us through the end of the year. So you can actually get started with us at no cost this quarter and be like fully live and ramped up going into Q1. And um, we also have a free sales dashboard that can plug into Kehi, Unify, and Whole Foods to give you sales analytics. Um, and I'll walk through a live demo as well. Um, but just some quick stats essentially. So we validated $20 million in deductions since launching in March. We're working with 60 customers. And I mentioned our pricing on the slide before. The average customer pays for a year-long partnership with us within 60 days. So off the bat, you're kind of seeing a 3x ROI on your partnership when working with Glimpse. And let me go ahead and walk through the actual demo. Um, cool. So I think everyone should be able to see my screen. Looks like we had a couple of questions come in. So, um, in terms of what percent we can get back from deductions. So typically what we've seen as an industry standard, with Kehi and Unify is 5 to 10% of your deductions can usually be won back, as invalid deductions. So in terms of like, so yeah, you can kind of think of the equation as what do you typically give to deductions? Is it like 20 to 30%? 5 to 10% of that can be money back. And yeah, we actually could integrate directly into the email for Unify to pull in unified deductions. So I'll quickly walk through some of the key elements of our dashboard here to help, help everyone get an understanding of what we do at Glimpse. So you can kind of see here we have all these different dashboards for the different connectors we have. And you can see here we're pulling in all of your deduction data into one place. And then you can kind of see here, we actually pull in the actual PDF backup file here. So you can actually download it from here instead of needing to go to the portal and actually get the evidence. And then you can see here, we'll actually classify it using our AI powered classification engine. And then we actually can map this to your internal chart of accounts for accounting purposes. So if you code deductions internally in a specific way, we can map that one-to-one. And you can kind of see that here. And then our AI can actually go in and pull out the relevant distribution center and all of the retailers that come in that deduction. So this is, like one of the ways that we're able to identify like when there's a duplicate retailer or a retailer that you're not in. We also pull out the relevant SKUs and then we like map everything to a check. And you can see here, we're validating every single deduction as it comes in. And when it's invalid, we'll actually go ahead and start the dispute process and follow through all the way until repayment. So just thinking about it, like you can filter by a specific check, for example, that you got paid. And you can see here, you have like all of the elements on line items and like every single deduction is reviewed. And you can always export this data as a CSV as well. And you can actually filter by like a specific classification type, a specific retailer, SKU, etc. Same thing, using Unify as an example, we're able to actually plug into your inbox directly that receives all of the remittances like this. And then our AI line item matching system can actually go and like line something up and find the relevant backup documentation here one-to-one, which is a really hard thing to do with anyone that's dealt with unified deductions. And you can kind of see here, everything is classified. With all of this data, you can actually have a whole analytics dashboard. And we're able to show you like how much has been deducted, how much was the gross invoice value, deductions over time, the biggest types of deductions you're getting hit with, the retailers affected, the SKUs affected, the types of promotions you're getting hit with. And then on the accounting side, we can actually help streamline the whole process where you can filter by specific check, and then just quickly see, um, uh, sorry, super simply, like what are all the different classifications and exactly what the line items are. And then that can be help you streamline the credit memo creation process, which is a big workflow for bookkeepers and accountants dealing with unifying KE deductions. And then finally, a big chunk of the pie of what we do is get you money back. So this data is actually real data from one of our customers that is in about 3,000 stores through KE Unify. When you work with Glimpse, we'll actually look back at all of your deductions in the past year and submit any disputes. So when you start your relationship with us, it's not like you're starting just the day of. Um, we'll look back at the past 12 months and deduct whatever we can. So for this customer, we've already disputed $186,000 worth of invalid deductions. And just in the past like 60 days, we've already won back 17,000 of that, with 167,000 continuing to stay open. So with Glimpse, you kind of put your deductions on autopilot and we're just getting you money back. And this, the goal is just that this dashboard and these numbers just keep going up. So um we onboard you. We actually ask you for a folder of your bill of ladings. We ask you for your promo calendar, etc. So then we're proactively reviewing and validating your deductions every single day. So without the cost of hiring someone full time to do this, just built into our pricing model, you're able to essentially get an outsourced deductions analyst and a full AI powered software platform. So that was just a quick demo. We also have a free sales dashboard that I'll quickly show you as well that we can get set up with. That can plug into KE, Unify, and Whole Foods. And this is something that's like no strings attached. You can get set up with us with no cost. And you can kind of see here, we'll pull in all your distribution data and provide you with a free sales analytics tool that you can keep track of like sales, drill down by product, store, retailer, city, and you have a full data table here. We track velocity, so you can keep track on like your velocities with like new accounts, and sort of see all of that data. And finally, an inventory module, so you can keep track of your inventory levels at all your distribution centers and kind of see how inventory levels fluctuate over time. And this is something that we can get set up with as well. So, um, I'll go ahead and pause. Are there any questions off the bat about the presentation, about the Glimpse dashboard, or our services? Happy to answer anything there and talk through anything.
Akash, there was one question around uh getting the UNFI data without portal access and if that's a capability.
Yeah, so actually, like, unified deductions data come in the inbox. We've actually built an integration into your inbox directly, like an accounting email or whatever, where we'll plug in programmatically and pull in all of the checks that come in from Unify and all of the backup documents. And then our AI system will match them up one to one behind the scenes. So it'll post into the dashboard in the same exact way. Cool. And then yeah, now is like sort of an open Q&A session, but there's a QR code here where you can go ahead and scan if you wanted to schedule a personalized demo with me. And yeah, happy to answer any more questions. And if there's no more questions, can give back everyone a couple of minutes today. Yes, we can pull fulfillments and BOLs directly through third-party portals. So when we onboard you, um, whatever your systems are internally, we can basically we'll just work with you to get access and then we'll pull them automatically and map them to our system. So our goal is to really put this on autopilot. So we work with so many different 3PL softwares, SPS Commerce, brokers, broker softwares, etc. Yeah, so one question that came in, there's some great benefits here and there's value to the software. The one's business with Unify is less than 150K annually. The costs are still high for the software. Any other pricing model? Yeah, definitely happy to chat about that live. We do, I mentioned that we do a pricing structure that's supposed to be incentive aligned to get you money back, along with also based on the number of doors that you're in. So potentially like the floor of our model could be of interest. The goal is to really be an ROI positive solution. So definitely can chat about that offline and see if there's anything that we can do there. Um, and then George's question, yeah, our platform is super secure. We follow all best in practice software standards tied to like the cloud system that we use, the AI models that we use, and everything is secure and private to each customer. We also do have a standard contract agreement that includes like a mutual NDA. So everything is completely private among and we have over 60 customers using us, super secure. So yeah, follow all best in practice software standards for security. Cool. Yeah, I guess we can give it another minute, but if there's no other questions, yeah, Connor dropped the link to my personal calendar. I'm one of the founders and the CEOs. I can definitely give you a lot, like a lot just candid feedback on what we're doing and how it could work for you guys. Um, yeah, the presentation and should both be available. Like the session was recorded. So we'll send a follow-up with both a link to the slides and a recording. And then also, yeah, can also do personalized demos with anyone that's interested as well. The goal is really to just give both as much education on what we're doing at Glimpse, but also just try to provide more education in the industry about how we can all be better about managing deductions. Awesome. Yeah. No, thank you so much. Hope to connect with a lot of you offline after this. And yeah, thanks so much for attending.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much and have a good rest of your day.